Well, good evening, everyone. Let us call the meeting to order here of the Alachua County Charter Review Commission. We appreciate everyone being here, appreciate the members being here. Just for the video and all, this is the Charter Review Commission, April 19, 2010. Let me welcome everyone here. We appreciate your participation. This is a process, an ongoing process. Tonight is our last regular meeting. Tonight our goal is to determine which items will go or which proposals will actually go to the public hearing phase. It's always up to the membership what we consider and what changes we make and so forth, but we'll begin the meeting here shortly, and then we'll come back once we determine later tonight what items will go to the public hearing. We'll advertise that in the newspaper and around. And our first public hearing will be May the 12th, followed by a second public hearing May the 26th, and a third public hearing on June the 9th. And that should wrap up the proceedings of the Charter Review Commission. And so that's our goal here tonight, but we do want to welcome you, and agendas are available, I think, up the front. But we're going to begin first here by asking if the members have had an opportunity to review the minutes from our March 27th meeting, and if you have, we'd accept a motion to either approve or if you have any changes. Or Joe Little has then moved approval of the minutes as presented. Any further discussion, questions, or additions or deletions? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. The next part of our agenda is general comments by the members, and so at this time I would pause, and any member that would like to make some brief comments here as we begin the meeting tonight, or any subject that you might want to talk about, I'll recognize you. If I'm not seeing any hands go up right off. Okay. Bill Richards. We understand that. Oh, great. Exciting stuff there. Yeah, I had 2 or 3 people tell me tonight they didn't know if they were going to watch us or 24, and so it was a toss-up there. So I hear you. But, Bill, we realize you're involved in things around the state, and so we appreciate you being here tonight. Any other comments tonight? Yes, sir. Just pull it right down to you. And yes, sir, I see what you're saying. Use the mics. I'm with you. Use the mic. And for those of you that haven't been here, when the light is off, that means your mic is on. When the light is on, that means your mic is off. All right. Seeing no other, yes, sir, John Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say one quick thing, because I know we're going to be discussing a whole variety of issues, and this is not directed at any one particular issue. But I hope that as we move forward, regardless of what side we all fall on those issues, that we will not focus on current members of commissions, elections. In other words, let's not focus on, I'm not saying anyone is doing this, but let's not focus on like the current county commission or current elected office officials. I hope we will at least ask ourselves what is in the best interest of the county, regardless of who may or may not be holding that seat at any given moment. I just wanted to say that's my hope anyway.
Good comment. Thank you very much. Rob Brinkman.
And I just had a question about the backup that we just received, the additional backup on the page. Actually, they're all labeled page 1, but the first page inside, there's a email from jackrd@aol.com.
That's correct.
And I was just wondering if anybody knew who.
That's from Jack Durrance,
Oh,
former county commissioner, served 28 years,
Okay,
and this room is actually named for him.
Right. Thank you. I see that now.
All right. Right. All right. Any other housekeeping matters we need to take up here to begin with? If not, I think those of you that have been with us before and have followed our proceedings, and those of you that are first time tonight, will see off the bat here that
Mr. Chair, can we slow down a little bit?
that this. Oh, DJ. Okay, great. Glad you're here, DJ. All 15 members are now present.
I don't know.
Slide her in here. We're maxed out up here, I can tell you. So I'm glad you're here, DJ.
This is a new record for how many people have been seated here.
I think so. I think we've said it. But all of us have been giving thoughtful consideration to all the proposals that have come in, and we appreciated those very much. And what we're going to do tonight after your comments that we're going to open up the floor for here in just a second is take the items one by one. And our attorney here, Sarah Blakely, is here in the front of the auditorium. And I'm going to recognize her, and she's developed some ballot language. We won't go through the actual amendment language, but the members are getting that, and we'll be massaging that, and she's given us the rough drafts on that already. But the ballot language, so that you know the topic, and that's what's important at this point, is the topic more so than the actual language that she comes up with as we go through this process that we'll adopt in June. But she will put up on the board there the ballot language. She can introduce it and talk about it. I'll recognize the members talk about it. And what we're going to do is, as we go through it, and we'll recognize you as time will allow, and we'd ask you to keep your comments as short as possible, as we'll all be keeping ours as short as possible because we've got a long way to go tonight. But in the end, those items that receive 8 of our votes, which is a majority of the commission, will then go on to the public hearing phase. And so we want to be able to advertise that so people will know that's what we're talking about at that time. And so we'll go through all, right now there's 11 different questions that have been set up. Whether or not all 11 will survive tonight or half of them or what, we'll find that out later tonight. But we're anxious to hear your comments and would ask if you could keep it, as short as possible, 3 minutes or so. We'd appreciate that. But at this time, with the permission of the board, we'll recognize any citizen that would just like to start off our meeting and speak to us. With Callie Blount. If you just, when you come up, just introduce yourself so we can put it on the record, and then we'll recognize you one by one.
My name is Callie Blount. I would like to speak to some of the ideas that have floated to all you ladies, only 2, and gentlemen. The idea about reorganization of the county commission, that is the notion of abolishing the county commission and creating a new county body that is nonpartisan and single-member district. I wonder if people have thought that through thoroughly. By virtue of the settlement pattern of this county, number 1, I think you will run afoul of the Voting Rights Act. Secondly, I think you're looking at fixing something that's not broken, and I think that might have to do with the current emotional effects of national politics, but this is not Washington. This is Alachua County. I want you to consider that the gains of generations of patient, nonviolent, long-suffering struggle, if they are pillaged, do not expect the same long-suffering, nonviolent response to trying to regain advantages that have already existed once taken away. That is very serious move. And if some also may consider this a very fascinating academic exercise, just a fascinating thing to experiment with and work with and maybe let students study, I think that you must consider letting history rank you with Europe's eugenics engineers and America's lobotomizers and Tuskegee experimenters. Ethical standards for experimenting with human systems do not apply only to clinical drug trials. Anything that is handling real human situations must be considered with the utmost responsibility. Anybody who would toy with that, if not sociopath, their thinking ranks somewhere with cannibalism. It is nothing to play with. So please consider very deeply the multiple consequences of things you're going to do.
Appreciate that. Just so that, I usually mention this earlier on, but the phase we're at right now, members have put forth ideas or proposals that have come from the public and so forth, so that we, in some, they wanted to think about it, wanted to discuss it some more. Some, in the end, as I said, may not survive the votes, but weren't ready to quite make a decision on them yet. And as I indicated earlier, some of the members have even said, I want to think about this, and it may be something that I vote for this time, but later on I may vote against it, and vice versa. And so we're just at that thinking spot right now in the proceedings. But we appreciate the comments, and that helps us think about it. Anyway, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Jan Tuttle. I'm a registered voter in Alachua County. Been registered to vote since I was eligible to. I'm also a person who cares passionately about participation in putting democracy into action every day of my life. First of all, through voting in any election that I'm qualified or eligible to vote for, and second, on a daily basis, I work to support the very deep efficacy of the election process within Alachua County. I only speak to two ways that I can be thwarted, a double whammy of thwart to my potential participation in democracy in action. The first is the closed primary. The second is in 2006, I was this close to what I thought was my ability to cast a meaningful ballot in an election for a county commissioner who I felt strongly would represent me. That door was slammed closed by a process, the write-in process, that is supported by law, and I do not have any issue in general with the write-in process. However, when it is used, a write-in candidate files specifically to close a campaign and to close a primary that could otherwise have been open, that slams the door in my ability to participate. Both of those double whammies would be eliminated with nonpartisan elections, which I support wholeheartedly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Tuttle. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Larry Travis, City Commissioner and former Mayor of the City of High Springs. The reason I'm here tonight is because at our last Alachua League of Cities meeting, we invited some of your members to come to visit with us, and during that discussion, it was said that we didn't do our homework. We didn't go out and get to visit with you and make our point as far as where we are with the dual vote. What the 9 municipalities of Alachua County are trying to do with this amendment is ensure and maintain our home rule. We fully understand that we are protected by the ordinance. A recent example of this was the city of Hawthorne. When they wanted to have their Grease Pig race, the county had an ordinance that says they couldn't. And they went back to their constituents and they passed an ordinance that says they could. And we fully understand that. What we're talking about is in the future for future charter amendments. Put simply, municipal powers, functions, services, and regulatory authority are proposed to be altered by future charter amendments. We think municipal voters should have a say as to what charter amendments they apply. You have to understand that all 9 municipalities put a resolution before this group. 9 municipalities, 47 elected officials. Now, I understand, you all understand that getting 47 elected officials to agree on anything is an absolute miracle. And that happened. That happened. 9 cities have passed a resolution. Municipal law does not trump charter amendments. Special interest groups can affect, and when we're talking about we're not talking about ordinances, we're talking about initiatives that are come before. For example, Article 10, Section 21 of the Florida Constitution. An example of this is that the Florida legislature did not pass on this. It was an initiative by a group of animal rights that said it is in the Constitution. Article 10, Section 21 says that you cannot transport a pregnant pig without that pig's ability to turn around. So initiatives can be brought before and they can pass. With the percentage of voters required to put amendments or referendums on the ballot going from 7 to 5, we think it's very important that we let this happen. Another example, for example, if the citizens of Gainesville decided that horseback riding was against animal rights and passed a charter amendment that said that we couldn't ride horses. I ride horses. I have horses. That's taken away from my ability. My citizens should decide whether we have the ability to ride horses or not ride horses. And you say, that will never happen? But it happened in Newberry, North Carolina. It happened. Newberry, North Carolina voted to do away with horse-drawn carriages in their city because PETA said it was cruelty to animals. Another example, if the citizens decided that we needed 6 firemen on every fire truck, and it was passed as a charter amendment, That would limit us from having our own fire department. We, at the present time, have a fire assessment. We put taxes into we think we can get by with 3. So why should a charter amendment that our citizens don't want be able to keep us from having the number of firefighters we think and our citizens feel are important? There are 2 conflicting issues on this, legal issues. The CRC has theirs, the Florida League of Cities has ours. The dual vote position has not been challenged in court or has been ruled on by a judge. This position is just like any other law, statute. It can be challenged in a court of law. This one hasn't, like many others. In 1998, Pinellas County ratified the charter changes and approved the addition of the dual vote to its charter. In 2008, Palm Beach County added to their charter, and it was approved by the voters by 73%. Neither one of these has been challenged. Again, I want to say what we're doing here is giving us the right to have our home rule. We should be able to decide what we want to have. We're not talking about ordinance. We're talking about citizen initiative or county commission initiative that affects our ability to have home rule. Mr. Chair, I appreciate that very much. I'd be glad. I have these comments on chart. I didn't read them all because I know you're hurting for time. But I think we have a definite point of interest here, and I want to say thank you for all those people that took the time to visit with us. I called some people who never got back to me. A lot of other people called, and I got a chance to talk to them. And I appreciate it because that shows me that you all are interested in what's going on here, that you haven't made up your mind, and that you have an open mind on this. And so I appreciate that, Mr. Chair, and thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Give me just 2 seconds. I will recognize you in just a second. I know when, just to correct one thing there, and I appreciate very much those comments, and I think I know what you're asking. I imagine Mr. Grundy's going to bring that up here in just a second. The item under consideration, though, as far as from a 7 to 5, is only about ordinances. Charter amendments would still require 10%. And so that's just a little different. But in ordinance, you're right, 5 to 7.
Maybe
7 to
that's
5.
why I was.
That's correct. Thank you.
I was so interested in putting that in there, Mr.
Well, you did good. You did good.
But thank you. I'm sure Professor Little got me on that one.
Let me recognize Mr. Grundy Gomez here.
Mr. Chair, as a matter of fact, I actually took some time and I met with the Alachua League of Cities, and I took a moment. So what I'm going to do is, where's Beth Rollins at? I'm looking for Beth Rollins.
In the back there.
Mr. Chair, if I could have ask if Beth Rollins could come forward, I would like to actually bring it before that motion back before this body regarding Beth, if you don't mind coming forward. Mr. Chair, we as members of the CRC we bring before this body potential things to put on a ballot that affect issues of governance. And I had the pleasure of meeting with them, and I think last time this body was somewhat cheated in what was brought before us because we didn't understand the basic concepts. But I think Commissioner Travis absolutely hit the nail right on the head. These are issues of governance that affect the municipalities, and I think we have a duty to put things on the ballot that affect issues of governance. That's what we're here for. So this is an issue that affects governance, and since it's going to affect governance, we don't want to have the county place undue burden upon our municipalities. And so I think that what we need to do, and I looked through the charter, and understanding it. And I think what we should do, Ms. Rollins, if you would not mind, is to talk about what we had that discussion, what Mr. Drum from High Springs talked about. Just a brief synopsis, Mr. Chair.
Let me do this, Mr. Grundy, because I sense that you're wishing to make a motion.
I
It's
am.
appropriate to rescind or reconsider that question. Is that correct, what you're looking
Yes,
to do?
please.
What we'll do then, again, given the time restraints of tonight, let us finish the citizen comments, and I'll recognize Mr. Grundy Gomez first and let him make that motion, and we'll see if we have a majority wish to reconsider that question, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, could I say something?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Very
Mr. Martin,
briefly?
please.
And I know distinguished gentleman from High Springs didn't mean to, but since I was so closely associated with it when it was out there, City of Hawthorne did not ask for a greased pig, because that is illegal in the state of Florida. It was simply a pig chase, and I was known as Mayor Pig Chase. So if I'm going to be known as Mayor Pig Chase, at least let's make sure it was not a greasy pig.
We knew that you were involved in that situation one way or the other, so we're glad you're there.
I told him that we should have a watermelon chasing contest because I could catch one.
That's probably more correct. Great. Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself to us.
Yes, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I am Matthew Marsh. I've been a resident of Alachua County since 1982. I've been a registered voter for over 40 years and have never missed a vote anywhere where I was a registered voter. Today I represent the Alachua County Democratic Executive Committee as chairman of its legislative committee. I wish to submit a letter to the commission, and I have, I think, sufficient copies for all
Great.
who receives these.
You'll give it to Mary right here. She'll distribute it for you, Matthew.
I won't read the entire letter, so I'll be brief. But by unanimous vote of the Alachua County Democratic Executive Committee during our general membership meeting last Wednesday, I was directed to deliver this letter and inform you that we strongly oppose two proposals currently before the Commission. We oppose moving from partisan to nonpartisan elections, and we oppose any scheme to install single-member district elections. We do support fair and representative elections for all Alachua County residents, whether urban, rural, or rural-urban. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Marsh. All right. We'll get back to you. Come on up, Mr.
I'm next?
Yes, sir. It looks like you.
My name is Bob Hallman. I live in High Springs. And do you want to give these to the members? I'm just going to be very brief. I want to read some excerpts here from an article that I wrote for the newspaper back in February, and this is in relation to nonpartisan elections and so forth. And it's an accepted election system has elected presidents, governors, senators, congresspersons, county commissioners, plus others. It's still working and has always been assisted in the political party since George Washington's. Our election process with political party participation has been a long history of success. Not all political party activity is promoting a specific candidate for office. The responsibility also involves helping to suggest a candidate with experience, promote improvement with issues and concerned citizens, and the matter of the party also is to support certain ideologies and concepts that voters feel are important, and establish a competitive campaign that encourages voter participation. Historically, our democracy has had a partisan election process which has been accepted and used effectively on all levels of government, local, state, and federal. Why is it necessary to tinker with politics? Nonpartisan is a form of politics also. You can't take politics out of politics. Developing a different political culture is not a solution. Nonpartisan as an elected process is a bad policy for governing. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hallman. Appreciate that. Yes, sir, Reverend.
Mr. Chair and members of this committee, my name is Reverend Milford Lewis Griner. As a resident of Alachua County, and founder and chairman of the Rosa Parks Quiet Courage Committee, I stand today to state my opposition to the proposed charter amendments by Alachua County Charter Review Committee. For 34 years I have been in Florida. I have never witnessed any difficulty in seeing the democratic process in Alachua County work in a positive and productive manner, with the end result being dedicated and qualified citizens being elected to the county commission, and especially African Americans elected to represent the entire county as opposed to representing only a small region of the county. I am certain that many citizens can echo the sentiments I'm expressing here today. There is an old saying that still rings true. If it's not broke, don't fix it. The current system has worked very well. Therefore, the proposed changes must be abolished. They would be detrimental to the cause of democracy as it relates to our present two-party system, and would create a horrible blemish on the unscarred history of strong diversity and progress made in Alachua County. Diversity itself within the county governing body would suffer a painful, unneeded, and undeserved demise. Let me end with this somewhat unusual analogy. We are all pleased when we witness Walmart stores announcing their famous rollback of higher store prices to lower store prices for the benefit of the shoppers and to bring more shoppers into their stores. But in the case of these proposed amendments, rollbacks would not be in the best interest of the county and existing way of governing. We must not allow a rollback of justice, a rollback of diversity, and a rollback of progress with these proposed amendments. For if this is allowed to happen, unlike the shoppers who will flock to the stores to reap saving benefits and praise Walmart for its actions, there will be no praise and thanks forthcoming from the lovers of justice and diversity and democracy in Alachua County. So don't lower the symbolic bars of these two long-standing principles, but keep them raised and raised high so that Alachua County can continue to be a great model of how, when these concepts are allowed to thrive, to breathe, and to have productivity, we will all be the better for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend.
Mr. Chair, if I may ask a question of the Reverend?
Yes, sir.
Just a little clarification. I appreciate you coming and sharing your thoughts. I assume that you're in opposition to the single-member districts.
Yes.
But you used the plural amendments, so I'm wondering if there are other amendments besides the one that would create single-member districts that concern you.
No, just the ones that deal with the elimination of the county commission as we currently know it,
Charter.
and elimination of county-wide election process.
Thank you very much. I agree.
Appreciate the clarification. Mr. Ulrich, welcome back.
Thank you. Again, my name is Ivan Ulrich, and I'm the president of the Builders Association of North Central Florida. We have over 600 member companies and represent thousands of individuals in this community. And to reiterate what I came up here and talked about last month, I suppose it was, our issues that we want to put forward is to go with nonpartisan elections in Alachua County, which would give everyone the opportunity to vote on the candidates and get the best candidate out there. Second, term limits for county commissioners of 8 years, 2 four-year terms. And then last but not least is the 5 single-member districts, which would allow representation in the outlying areas and give us representatives from all over the county, so all citizens in Alachua County are represented properly on the county commission.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. Mr. Emmer?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Phil Emmer. I've lived in Gainesville since 1960. That's 50 years. And I tried to imagine as if I were a member of this commission, which I certainly did not want to do, and tried to answer what my thoughts would be on each of them. So I took this sheet from the last meeting, and I would like to quickly go through the list. On item number 1 for single-member districts, I think I'm agreeing with most of the people that have spoken. I say no, because this would cause divisiveness. The commission should work in the interests of all. The county commission should work for all people, not just for their district, whether it be Hawthorne or Newberry or High Springs. As to question number 2, I would say yes. We need not to leave anybody out in the voting process if they want to vote. So whether it be Democrat, Republican, Independent, or whatever, they should have the right to vote as long as they're registered and legally in the community. Question 3, citizens initiative petitions, to reduce it from the current 7%, and in some cases 10%, I'm not sure if I understand the difference why, to 5%. I would oppose that because it would work to make frivolous petitions that, like they do often in California, but make it easier to put funny things on the ballot. Question number 4. The unanimous vote of the County Commission, I would absolutely not support that because one stubborn or petulant commissioner, perhaps with an axe to grind, could control the entire county with a single vote. On issue number 5, abolishing the Board of County Commissioners, replacing it with a Board of Charter Commissioners, I understand there's good and bad with that, and I had a question mark by that, so I have no comment on that issue. And question number 6, increase 5 to 7 commissioners with 5 elected in single districts. This creates too much secularity. Secularity, is that a word? I'm not sure. The commission should work for the interest of all. Question number 7, 5 commissioners elected in single-member districts. No, for the same reason as above. I believe that if they're elected regularly, we have 5 votes instead of 1. Question number 8, election of charter commissioners by nonpartisan elections. I strongly support that view that there should not be any question about partisanship. Question number 9, terms for charter commissioners. I would strongly support 2 terms in office. Our current national governing body teaches this is not a very democratic way, and I apologize for dealing with anybody, but I'm not our county commission. And last question, limiting salaries of charter commissioners and the chair. We should want and need excellent commissioners. That doesn't speak directly to the issue, but our country was founded. We're learning a lot about our Constitution as these very difficult days come by in our country. Our country was founded on the idea that it is a pleasure and a right to serve, and it shouldn't be about money. So I would say we want excellent commissioners, and I can't say what their salary should be. With that, I thank you. That's the way I would have voted if I was a member of this commission.
Bill, I did not quite understand your last comment about the salaries. You are for limiting the salaries or against?
I didn't say that because I can't say that. I would say we need to serve. We want to have excellent commissioners who want to serve for 2 terms. So I'm not qualified to say what their salary should be. I am offended sometimes when I hear the salaries for part-time jobs, but this is another day and another thing.
Yeah, the current proposal is,
Okay.
go ahead, I'd rather Mr. Wood speak.
Finish? I'd just like to address what you said about lowering the 7% to 5% petition sign
To 5%.
to get an ordinance before the public.
Yeah.
I have been deeply involved with the Quiet Lakes movement to get a curfew countywide on airboats, and I can assure you it is not easy at all, even to get 5% of the voters, because the time limits in which you're able to do that are only a few months, and if you have a certain amount of people or a limited amount, it is a difficult thing to do. I do certainly agree with you that we do not want frivolous things before the voters, because the more that we have before the voters, the less likely they are to be informed, which they are very uninformed anyway.
And I can understand your point of view, and I would not necessarily disagree with it, but I would stand on what I said. I plan to have a program starting where I will be required to get 10 or 7%, and I'm not concerned about it. I think that the issue that I want to bring before the public will be important enough that we will easily get the 5, 7, or 10%. So, but I just would like to avoid that, because you hear about these things in other states where these are on the agenda, and they create havoc with local governments. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Tranquillo, did we get all of your comments? Yes, sir.
My name's Don Marsh. I'm a citizen of Alachua County. I've been doing business here since 1981. I've actually lived here since 1988. I have been a candidate for office 2 times, and I'm speaking specifically to the idea of single-member districts and nonpartisan races for county commission. And in 2002, when I ran, I was running for District 4. And the thing that I learned was that I had about as much relationship with District 4 as any other district. It seemed to have no intrinsic relationship whatsoever. I had to live there, but there was no logical connection with whether or not I actually represented that area. And yet I had to campaign everywhere. I went to La Crosse, I went to Waldo, I went to every place in between. I spent 10 months visiting every part of this county, places I knew not of. And at the end of it all, reflecting on this, and how expensive it is to run countywide, it seemed like it would really have, and probably does have, a disparate impact on anybody who is not of, any substantial means to run for a district seat, because you have to run countywide. And it also seems that for all practical purposes, you should probably do most of your campaigning in the city of Gainesville, because that's where most people are. Once again, I think that would probably have some sort of disparate impact on rural areas. I mean, when's the last time we had someone from a rural area serving on the county commission? It seems like it's been a very long time. And, I've been listening to other people's comments about this, and whatever dire circumstances result from that as far as having single-member districts. But if single-member districts are that bad, perhaps we should abolish Congress, because everybody represents some district where they represent the interests of the people there. And I think that the people of each district in Alachua County probably should have some sense that there's somebody looking out for them, rather than it is just a shared interest by a large group of people. Regarding the nonpartisan part of that, I agree with Ms. Tuttle that there is a certain amount of gamesmanship that can come about through, basically using the system. I remember that I wasn't able to vote in that same election. Also, I was quite disappointed, because I thought it was going to be an open primary. And as far as whether it takes you can take the politics out of it by making it by making it nonpartisan. I learned something from watching my son's t-ball games when he was little, and that was that the kids, even if you were having those non-competitive games where nobody kept score, if you asked the kids, they all knew what the score was. They were all paying attention, and they cared. The players and the insiders always know who each other are. The people on the outside just want you to play fair. So I beg of you, please, at least let the people decide on this. I think that they'll get what they want. Thank you very much.
Appreciate those comments. Thank you. Mr. Gundy?
Mr. Marsh, you just ran in a race for mayor.
Yes.
And you're in favor of nonpartisan elections, but your race was about as nonpartisan as they come. Everybody knew your race was not nonpartisan. As you were defined, you were clearly defined of what party you were affiliated with, what your values were. So you're in favor of something that didn't favor you. You didn't win based on a nonpartisan election, and it didn't define you as being nonpartisan.
Well, you can thank the Gainesville Sun for that, because I didn't announce myself. It was against the rules, I understand, to announce myself as whatever my party is. So that's, I just had to work extra hard to make sure people knew what the issues were, and that's what I did.
So then, therefore, you would be in agreement in saying that nonpartisan elections really are nonpartisan elections in this town, are they? I
don't know. I came pretty close.
Yeah. Does it?
Mr. Marsh.
Yes.
Martin.
Please don't take this as, I know you're kind of sitting in the catbird seat right now, and this is not an attack or anything. I want that to be clear.
Okay.
What I'm concerned about, and this is generally, there's an issue about nonpartisan election being a remedy to a perceived problem, or a single-member district being a remedy to a perceived problem. What I'm concerned about, and I hope maybe you can educate me on this or someone else, I have not heard any particular evidence that would actually be the case, whether or not a single-member district would actually ensure that a person from a rural community would be elected. I've heard that, but I haven't heard any evidence to that effect. Are you in a position to provide that?
All I can give you is really my observation, and that is that when I had to run countywide, there was no real connection between me and the district that I was running for, and I really think the burden of proof is on other people to show me that rural people do get elected to office.
And I understand that, but that is posing a change. We've heard so much from, well, if it's not broke, why fix it? So I don't know. I think the burden will be on the individual to advocate the change.
Okay. Appreciate it, Mr. Marsh.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Yes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kara Sutton. I've been a resident of Alachua County for 26 years. I've been a registered Democrat here for 14 years, and I just come before you this evening, first of all, to thank you for your service. And I know it's difficult for me as a single mom and as a business owner to come and be here and share my thoughts with you this evening. I'm sure it's very difficult for you to spend time away from your families as well, but I certainly appreciate your service. I just have 2 comments to make. I would certainly like to see every voice in Alachua County to be heard. I support nonpartisan elections. I also would like to see 2 4-year term limits for our commissioners. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Sutton. Appreciate that very much. Yes, sir.
I'm Stafford Jones. I want to remind you that the public debate happens via elections. And through this process, there is a little bit of debate going on here, but what you're being asked to do is not to decide whether or not you necessarily support or don't support some of these issues in front of you. What you're being asked to decide is whether or not you continue to let the public debate happen. If you vote for some of these issues, and there's a couple that I'm pretty interested in, one of them is single-member districts, the other is nonpartisan elections. I happen to like one of them. I happen to not like the other. I'm not going to tell you which is which tonight. What I am asking you to do is to let the public debate continue to happen. The public needs the opportunity at this point, and you have heard in the past few meetings, in the past number of meetings, you have heard enough testimony to realize that people are very interested in these 2 specific issues, and I think you've heard enough to decide that it is time to let the public have the debate out in the open via an election. This is a democracy, and people have stated we would like to have this debate. So that's what I'm asking you to do tonight, is to pass this on to the public to choose at an election.
Appreciate that, Mr. Jones. And as the next gentleman comes forward, I appreciate him making that point that in the final analysis, we 15 will get 1 vote in November. We're not going to be supporting or opposing as far as a body. We'll go out of our work as of June the 9th, most likely. And so at that point, whatever decisions made will be made by the voters themselves. And he's right. Our hard decision is what that debate's going to be. And as we're all seeing here tonight, as we've all learned and heard over the years, that no matter how thin you slice the bacon, there's 2 sides to it, right? Yes, sir.
Very true. My name is Mason Alley, and thank you very much for, one, participating in the commission. I, like many others, really respect the fact that you all are taking an inordinate amount of time and have invested a lot in our community, and the changes will have an effect over a decade, and so I just thank you for that. The 2 issues that I'm here to talk about, and I think a lot of people have talked about it already, I'll just briefly go on the record, are the nonpartisan elections, which I believe would be a positive thing, just coming out of a nonpartisan election myself. I think the issues that we dealt with were not Republican or Democrat or even independent issues, but they were issues that had local effects, and that at the county level are also local issues that we need to be addressing. As I went through the Alachua County Commission guiding vision, which would be the overseeing, sort of template for what the county commission would look at. What I looked at and saw is that, there are things like the East Gainesville redevelopment, economic opportunities, poverty, homeless, the environment. These aren't issues that we shouldn't go down partisan lines on. I mean, quite frankly, I don't think Coppers is a Republican, Democrat, or independent issue. It's an issue that affects us all. And so those are the things that I would ask. Let's put aside sort of the party machines on both sides. I think, quite frankly, we're at a time in history where there's a lot of people that are tired of their individual parties. I know I am, and I'd rather them deal not on a liberal or a conservative, on a Republican, Democrat, or an independent. I'd like to have people talk about what's right and wrong, and that's what I'd like them to judge on. The other one is the single districts, and why I would put a word in for that is because I think it provides accountability. I think that, an earlier speaker talked about the fact that we have a United States Congress, but the congressmen and congresswomen always go back to their district and provide accountability. And so I would argue that if Coppers was in your district and you had to go back and deal with your local people on that every time, that either something would be done, you would make an extraordinary effort to get something pushed through at a county level, or you would go back to no job. And I think that's an important factor in terms of accountability. The last thing that I would say is that I'll just read it to you. A great nation now demands that its leaders abandon the politics of partisan division and find creative solutions to promote the common good. A people that prizes candor, accountability, and fairness insists that a government of the people must level with them and champion the interests of all American families. I would say all Alachua families. A land of historic resourcefulness has lost its patience with elected officials who have failed to lead. It is a time for a change. We can do better. And that is from Renewing America's Promise, which is the Democratic Party platform of 2008.
Appreciate
Thanks.
your comments very much. Thank you, Mr. Allen. Yes, sir.
John Reiskin is my name. I speak for myself. I've been a resident for 43 years in this county, and I agree with most of what the last speaker spoke about. Most issues we in Gainesville are proud of the quality of life. I also, with respect to Mr. Jones' remarks, we do have a commission, and you have some responsibility to use your wisdom to determine what goes on the ballot. I think that is an appropriate place. If we were to agree that to put on the ballot that we could basically disband the IRS, it might, especially so soon after April 15th, get a majority vote. So you offer a screening process, and I do agree that on reasonable proposals, let the public decide. Part of your job is to figure out what's reasonable and what's practical and this sort of thing. I do not favor nonpartisan elections because I think the political parties stand for something. Their designation since 1800, before that we had supposedly nonpartisan national elections, do stand for something, and that doesn't, even though I side with one party over another, it does not mean that one is correct and one is not. This is up to the public to make that distinction and appreciate those differences. I want to talk about term limits. I've been disappointed in the consequences of term limits in our state legislature. It seems like an amateur hour sometimes up there in Tallahassee. I think the voters are responsible for limiting the terms of their elected officials. I do think sometimes incumbents have too much advantage, though I suspect this year incumbents don't have any advantage. But we'll see about that. With regard to single-member districts, I agree with Mr. Emmer and some others, but I am concerned about rural areas having representation, and I don't really know the mechanism of redistricting, but I think that should be taken into account in the redistricting process. And finally, something that's not a proposal at all that I've seen, and has to do with elections in general of the county commissions. One of my concerns is that we elect county commissioners at the same time we elect national and state offices, and that creates a great dilution about the issues that are being considered the local issues. Now, in the city election, we have the problem of a low turnout, and that is a big issue. But I would like to see, and it's not been proposed and maybe is inappropriate here, to see our elections for county offices be in odd years in November, traditional time for voting. I think that would allow us, all of us, to know that an election is coming every November, every year, on issues that we are concerned with. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it very much, Mr. Riskin. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the Charter Review Commission. My name is Ed Jennings. I'm one of the elected co-chairs of the African American Accountability Alliance, affectionately called the 4As. We had a conversation with you all at the last meeting about an issue that wasn't appropriate for your commission, but this one, the issues we're having today, are definitely appropriate. On the April 12th board meeting of the Board of Directors, voted to oppose the proposed charter amendments by the Charter Review Committee that were put together, we believe, under Mr. Little's hand that abolishes the Board of County Commissioners and creates a Board of Charter Commissioners. The proposal further recommends changing the system of electing county commissioners from at-large to a combination of at-large and single-member districts. The proposal includes eliminating partisan elections and having commissioners elected in nonpartisan elections. The 4As board also recommended that we collaborate with other like-minded organizations in opposing and defeating these charter proposals. Those groups, some of which you've already seen, been the Visionaries, the DEC, the Martin Luther King Commission, and the NAACP, and there are others that we didn't even solicit that are here speaking against those proposals. The African American Accountability Alliance is a local, grassroots, community-based organization whose purpose is to improve the social, economic, political, cultural, and spiritual and educational quality of the life for African Americans that live in Alachua County. The 4As was formed from a collaboration with Martin Luther King Commission on Florida and the African American Elected Officials Coalition. We hold all of our precepts in equal regard, but the fight for suffrage, being that of the vote, and full enfranchisement at the ballot has been one that predates the Civil War. The Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision and post-Civil War Reconstruction period decisions with Plessy versus Ferguson, the passage of the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act of 1964, 1965, and the Shaw v. Reno and its progeny of Supreme Court decisions. I've told you those entities that are supporting our position. The citizens of Alachua County have seen fit to elect at least one African American to the Alachua County Commission continuously since 1974. His name is Tom Coward, and you'll see his picture on the wall. And in 2002, the citizens saw fit to increase that number to 2 African Americans and have continued to this day. We humbly request that the Alachua County Charter Review Commission reject any proposals to the Alachua County Charter that will negatively impact this long-standing practice and thus limit the civil rights of African Americans and other citizens in Alachua County. It is our understanding that there is a proposal to abolish the county commission and create a new charter that includes charter county commissioners. We are unclear of the genesis, much like Member Martin, genesis or purpose of this proposal. Unlike other counties that have dealt with or are dealing with the allegations of fraud and abuse in the election process or criminal behavior of their sitting or former elected officials, we have a long storied history of statesmen and stateswomen getting elected to the county commission from Alachua County, also including issues of diversity of ethnicity and gender. And we're in extreme disagreement and oppose the proposals that will change the at-large election process to a district vote process and changing our county commission elections from partisan to nonpartisan. We vehemently oppose that. The concept of changing from at-large districts to only district elections has a long, to at-large elections has a long and rich history. It has largely been done in communities where there has been a problem in electing African American, Hispanic, or other ethnic minorities. Usually, the district process is when you're trying to get a suspect class or some group that has a history of not being elected. We for the last 35 years, have not had that problem here. As was stated earlier, we are proud to live in a community wherein its citizenry have found diversity to be one of the many qualifiers necessary to have a balanced county commission. District-only elections have the propensity to divide communities along racial and economic lines, whereby issues in one community are no longer seen as important to the other community. For example, concerns in East Gainesville become only important to that district representative versus in the present system where they are important to the entire commission because the entire commission is each member's constituency. Only in extreme cases where historically discriminated groups have had trouble electing representation has the import of having some representation being more important than at large districts. We do not have that problem in Alachua County as many other counties do. As it relates to changing our commission to election from partisan election to nonpartisan, we also vehemently disagree. Political parties and primaries are ingrained in the fabric of the American elective process. Whether it be Democrat, Republican, Independent, or Green Party, we elect our president, our members of Congress, and in Florida, our governor, cabinet, and members of the Florida legislature through a partisan process. It has been the history of this county that the majority of the registered voters have decided to register as Democrats. Those are just the facts.
Also, in the last several decades in this county, this state, and in this country, African Americans have chosen to significantly register as Democrats also. This has resulted in the propensity for African Americans who seek elective office to run and be elected through the primary process as Democrats. A change in the process from partisan to nonpartisan would significantly diminish the elective capacity of African Americans and our likelihood of being successful in running for county commission seats. All 4 of the African Americans elected to county commissions have happened to be Democrats. And even in the historic election of 2000, when the country was torn apart by the Bush v. Gore decision, we as a county, state, and country did not choose to change our elections to nonpartisan from partisan. We just chose to make sure every vote would finally get counted. We've done a very good job of that here in Alachua County. In closing, we understand that there are citizens in Alachua County who wish to change the makeup of the county commission. We support their constitutional right to do so. We just suggest that they recruit candidates in the party of their choice, mobilize the electorate, and support that candidate. This is a process that's worked for our community for decades, and we expect it to continue to do so. And I was having a conversation with one of my good friends this afternoon about the city and county commission. And of the 5 that are there now, not 10 years ago, and we can all name former Commissioner Martin, who was from a rural area. We can former Commissioner Chuck Clements, who was from a rural area. But 3 of the 5 sitting county commissioners live in the unincorporated area or in a small municipality. Only 2 of them happen to live in the city of Gainesville today. So if the issue is how do we get rural representation, you have it now. Now, you may or may not like, depending on the persuasion, like the person that's representing that area. And that's what the process is all about. You get to elect, we get to elect, I get to elect, as the chairman said in closing, Mr. Chairman, you get to have 1 vote. But we have rural representation today on the county commission. Again, it may not be that representative that you or any individual may choose, but that's important.
Appreciate those comments.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I'll go first. Did the 4H take a position on term limits?
We did not. We did not weigh on that issue at all. Just those 2 nonpartisan and district elections.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Jennings, I'll save a lot of this for later. I've got some things I want to say later, but you addressed a couple of issues that, I've made no secret that I've, over the years, supported the idea of single-member districts. And I'm sure you can guess as to why, because I come from a very rural area, and, that's just the way I see it. I am concerned about minority, and I would not want to do anything that took away from minority representation.
Yes, sir.
And I've heard several speakers say this, but is there any actual evidence that shows that if you had some form of single-member districts, that it would actually make it more difficult for a minority candidate to run and succeed?
Let me not claim to be a scholar on the subject, but I can just opine an opinion, and you've got a couple scholars at the dais. Historically, areas that have chosen to go district, one of the reasons that they've chosen to do that is to make sure you had a minority person. That is how the District 1 seat got created in the city of Gainesville, because there had been a long period of time where there had not been an African American on the city commission. Again, and it was either 74 or 76, and somebody who's been around a little longer than me can tell me when Commissioner Coward was elected. And since that time, we have continuously had one person, because you've got a chance to have African Americans and other people of all colors and genders and ethnicities get a chance to vote countywide. Now, if you had a single-member district, you could enhance the propensity to have potentially one person of African American descent. If you had an East Gainesville that might include Hawthorne type district, you could potentially have that. But because this community, again, and I'm just always proud to live in this town, and my family's been here like yours 5 generations, that we have chosen, as of 2002, to have 2 African Americans. So if you chose to put on the ballot, and the citizens chose, again, the citizens will make the ultimate call to limit the district elections, you might limit the propensity of an African American, of the caliber of representation and number of representation that is there now, from going from 2 to 1 or none. Because this system, it's almost the old saying of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It is working now. So what is the rationale? If you may do something, I can't say that you will, but why, if we now have that diversity represented there now, why would we change? Why would we even want to go down the road of that possibly happening? So I can't promise you what would happen. None of us can. We don't know the results, so I can't look in the future. But if we have great representation now that are electing countywide, we have a community where everybody gets to vote for everybody on the November ballot. It is wonderful, and everybody has to go politic. And Hawthorne or La Crosse, Alachua, East Gainesville, High Springs, versus having someone just
have to campaign in East Gainesville or in a Hawthorne, and then the people in Newberry, I don't care about those issues because they're not representing me, and we don't want to go down that road.
We appreciate your comments very much.
I understand.
We're going to get to the just public hearing on May the 12th to begin with, and so we're going to get a lot of these comments then as well. And so we want to finish up these last 4 or 5 here, Mr. Martin, if at all possible. And we'll be, I'm sure Mr.
But I just want to, I've heard from several people something I just want to point out. And I said earlier, I'm not trying to direct this at any county commissioners, but since it's been redirected back to the current ones, that, and I swear I'm not directing this at anyone, but 3 of the current, and it has been for some time, current county commissioners are former mayors of Gainesville. So clearly that Gainesville is got the majority, and rightfully so in some sense, representation. I don't think that you can say, you know, it's just like for me claiming right now, let's say that I live in Hawthorne, which I've lived my whole life, and all of a sudden I decide that I'm going to move to Gainesville, okay, which I have every right to do, and I have lived here in the past. Does that make me the best candidate necessarily to be mayor of Gainesville? You know, in other words, I can't say that if I moved over here, that all of a sudden now I'm a big city boy, so to speak. So to infer that because someone has their life centered in Gainesville and then after they've been on a while moves to an outlying area, I think it does a disservice to those of us, and I'll just speak clearly, those of us who are supporting this primarily to increase representation in more rural areas. I certainly, if you can convince me that it would be a detriment to minority representation, I will switch my vote in a New York second, because I don't want to do that in any form or fashion. But I just want to make it clear, because I got a lot of friends out here, that my support has primarily been on over the last 2 times this commission has met, in the previous 10 years, when I was on a local city commission, that it has been to increase I'm under no illusions that somebody from Hawthorne or Waldo just automatically is going to be on the city commission. But it would make, in my view, people focus more attention on those areas. And I think you could make a case that it would actually do a greater job of ensuring long-term minority representation. But that's just my opinion. I don't have any facts to back that up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appropriate for me to respond, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to take any
very
more time.
quickly. Yeah, we're trying to.
Just quickly, again, the facts are, and I guess it depends on where you go. If you live in Alachua County, there are 3 members of the City and County Commission that live out of Gainesville. Those are the facts. I mean, there's no. I guess I don't know if you say if you live in Gainesville for a while, you can no longer live in a rural area, and so you don't count it. You don't count it as rural. I can't. I'm not sure what the credentials are.
There's a fact that 3 of them are currently former mayors of the city of Gainesville,
And there has been a rich history of people living outside of the city of Gainesville getting elected to the county commission. So I would agree with that. That is true. So we've had that history. So that is. My only point in saying that in regard to the forays is, let's realize that we don't have an all City of Gainesville commission today. And so when we're trying to fix an issue, I believe it may be more about, respectfully, who you may want to get elected versus that there are non-Gainesville people on the commission now, because those are the facts today.
Appreciate
Thank you very much.
Very much. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
My name is Brian Harrington. I'm representing the Business Community Coalition. We've got a couple points, 2 of which have been heard a few different times tonight. I'll start with the ones that haven't been. One is a yearly audit of the county enterprise funds. Currently, there is no required audit of the county enterprise funds, and thus there's very little accountability of how those funds are spent each year. And the proposed change is to amend the county charter to require enterprise funds undergo a detailed financial audit on an annual basis. Next is having, again, to do with financial accountability. The county budget from year to year is subject to change, and we'd like to see a measure to introduce line item by line item consistency from year to year within the budget, so that the citizenry has a better opportunity to read and understand the county budget from year to year. Then the next ones are similar to what we've already talked about. One is redistricting. Right now, if you look at the Alachua County Commission, the current districts are drawn where the city of Gainesville impacts all 5. I believe what we would like to see is some measure to create districts that are representative of the city of Gainesville, and then districts that are representative of the outlying areas. So you have a Gainesville influence on the commission, which is representative of the population of Gainesville, as it represents the whole Alachua County, which is roughly about 50%. And then you have commission seats that are more geared towards the rural areas to give those voices an opportunity to be heard, because they actually represent close to 51% of the population of this county is in unincorporated Alachua County and in the 8 municipalities aside from that of Gainesville. Nonpartisan elections is the other issue. It revolves around the concept of the primary process. In our current situation, going by the rules that are in place, there's the opportunity for parties to manipulate those rules in such a way that it closes primaries to eliminate about 32% of the voters registered in Alachua County to participate in the process. And we'd just like to see that all voters in Alachua County have an opportunity to cast their vote, be it at the primary level in August or in November in a general election. And then the last item is local accountability for county commissions regarding salaries. We're not saying what the salary should be. We just would like to see that at a local level, the county commission vote on their own salaries as opposed to it being legislated from Tallahassee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herring, very much. Appreciate those comments. Yes, sir.
Hi. My name is Caleb Burton. I've lived in Gainesville for 4 years. I've been a homeowner here for 2 and opened a business 4 months ago. Previous to moving to Gainesville, I was from the state of Montana. It's a very small state. There's only about 900,000 people. And I've heard several times tonight the issue of the phrase, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I wanted to address that because I feel like with the two issues two of the hot issues on the table of redistricting so that rural areas have more representation, as well as nonpartisan elections, can affect something that I perceive as broken, and that is voter turnout. In the state of Montana, 90% is average for voter turnout. I grew up in a very political atmosphere, and I loved it. That's why I'm here tonight. I wasn't planning on speaking, or brought some notes. But I believe that if you redistrict to where people feel like they have an individual representative, like in Montana where we had 2 senators and 2 representatives, that's all we got, you needed to vote for the people who represented you. And then if you took away that nonpartisan or that partisanship, I was recently looking at a stat, and I think about 35% of people in the city of Gainesville are registered as independent, which I was till I moved here, and I couldn't vote in some of the primaries, so I was very upset about it. So I feel like those two issues, should they be allowed to go to the populace to vote on them, could result in higher voter turnout as a tradition of the city, which I believe, with the political atmosphere that's here, is something that Gainesville deserves and needs.
Appreciate those comments.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Mr. Brinkman.
Currently, the county has at-large elections, but the city has 4 single-member districts, and yet city elections have very low turnout. So I fail to see how single-member districts increase turnout, because it's certainly not working in the city of Gainesville. And I'm really flabbergasted about the 90% turnout in Montana. I think that's great. And
it's easier to get when you got less people, but,
yeah,
I do feel like that is addressed by the nonpartisan issue. I would prefer to identify as an independent, and most people I know in my neighborhood and in the city, I feel, rather than following party lines, would agree to that. Now, I do see the advantage of party lines because it's easier to raise funds and to identify specific issues that are important to you. However, at a local level, most of the things that parties identify themselves by don't matter to us. I mean, really. And I don't like having to get confused about those two things. I don't want to vote for Democrat or Republican at the city level.
All right. We appreciate very much your comments, and good luck with that new business. Yes, sir, Representative.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I wanted to just touch on some people issues.
For the TV.
I'm Dr. Robert Casey. I'm a retired family practitioner here in town, and I've lived in Gainesville since 1961, except for 2 years of internship. What I want to do is go back to what Tip O'Neill said. You know, Tip O'Neill was an Irishman, and he was from Massachusetts, and he had a book out a couple of years, maybe 10 years ago, saying all politics is local. And I'm here to emphasize that that's very true, and it's a tradition. It's something that we want to always support. One of my favorite ladies in the world is former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. And to the 2 ladies on the commission, this is what I like about her. In politics, if you want anything said, ask a man. If you want anything done, ask a woman. Thank you, ladies, for your service. I want to read a couple of short things from the Florida Constitution. Preamble. We, the people of the state of Florida, being grateful to Almighty God for our constitutional liberty, in order to secure benefits, perfect our government, ensure domestic tranquility, maintain public order, and guarantee equal civil and political rights to all, do ordain and establish this Constitution. And then Section 1 of that reads as follows. Political power. All political power is inherent in the people. And I think this commission recognizes that, and I want to emphasize that point. I served in the Marine Corps. I was volunteered when Korea broke out, and I know what it's like to be humbled by going through Marine Corps boot camp at Parris Island. And in all services, they have something similar. And you really have to experience military boot camp to really realize what goes on there, but it's good training. And then I later went through Pensacola, got my wings, and went back in the Marine Corps, and retired as a captain. And in the Marine Corps, I was taught the principles that I want to tell you about. It's called, I call it, hello. H-E-L-L-L-O. The first L stands for listen. You have to listen to the people that you want to lead or that you want to represent. The second L stands for learn. You have to go back to sources available to you, read, study it, master it, and it's only when you've listened to the people, you've learned from other sources, that you're in a state where you can lead. So I know that this is a thing that I keep before me at the breakfast table. Simplify. That's all you got to do, is simplify things, but it's a great task, and I know that each of you are up to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Casey. Appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you.
Last three people or whatever's there in line, so we can wrap this up, or otherwise we're not going to get any business done tonight, and we'll turn this into the public hearing. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Darlene Pafallo. I'm going to make it a KISS. Keep it simple, whatever you want. I think that what I'm hearing here is a lot of campaigning. And if you put this on the ballot, whether you want single district or you want nonpartisan or salary caps to have the commissioners as part of the charter, I think you have a responsibility. You're all divided. I can see. I'm listening. I'm watching the eyes. I'm watching the body language. And you're as divided as our audience here is. And I think it's a waste of everybody's time. You can see the three main issues that everybody in probably Alachua County are concerned about. And I think it's your job, and what your job is, to put it on the ballot and let it go to the public and let them campaign one way or the other, whether it passes or not. And I don't believe it's your job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I think this line's getting longer.
That's all right. I'll be fast.
Yeah, if you could.
I'm Laurie Newsom, and I just wanted to say that several people have already said what I was going to say, and I know from meeting with commission members individually and here as a group that all of you are interested in having the voting public have an opportunity to have a say about these amendments and moving them forward. And I really appreciate it. The time that you've taken with me as an individual on an individual basis and here in these meetings is much appreciated. There are a lot of people out there that are very, very interested in the two main amendments of nonpartisan and single-member districts, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newsom. Yes, sir.
How you doing? My name is Dr. Michael Bowie, President of the Alachua County branch of the NAACP. During the beginning of the American Revolution, an African was killed. His name was Crispus Attucks. And when Crispus Attucks died at the beginning of what was then the Boston Tea Party, which led to the revolt of the citizens of the United States, or it wasn't the United States at that time, but in fighting for what we would exist as, he would not know that later on he or people who looked like him may not have the opportunity to vote. Later on, they did gain some opportunity and learned how to, as we say it, play the game. And during that period of time, when they were learning to play the game, they elected a number of individuals who looked like them, African Americans, into office. This was pre-Reconstruction. And then the game was changed. Now, I say I represent the NAACP, and let me just say it. The NAACP is a civil rights organization, and we consist of members, we consist of a number of members who are in a variety of affiliations. My vice president is sitting there, and she's a member of the Democratic Party. I'm a Republican, and a very proud Republican. Now, I oppose, the NAACP opposes single-member districts and the nonpartisan process. If we are to be successful in this community, then we have to do it the right way. We have to bring forth individuals, regardless of which party you're talking about, who are going to be about the people. And that can be done even when you represent one party or another, or you're an independent. You have to be about the people to be elected. Come forth and do that. We oppose those two items, the single-member districts and the nonpartisan election.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bowie.
Mr. Chair, can we, in the sake, since we're not at a public hearing, maybe limit citizen comment to 2 minutes?
Yeah, we'd ask that you make it as brief as possible, or else we're not going to get any business done tonight. Yes, ma'am, Mayor.
Good evening. Jean Calderwood, and I'm here as a citizen from the city of Alachua this evening. Last 14 years, I've served in various capacities in our city as mayor, commissioner, member of the Planning Zoning Board. Monday night will be my last meeting on the city commission. I have term limited myself out of office. I've decided that change is a good thing and new blood is a good thing. And actually, Mr. Ben Bukhari, our newest and youngest commissioner, is here this evening and will carry on the vocal position that the city of Alachua is known for in a constructive manner, I hope. I'm here this evening to repeat not the things that you've heard before, but to concur with many of those things, particularly Commissioner Travis from High Springs, to maintain and respect the municipal control of our cities that are throughout Alachua County that make it such an attractive place to live. The diversity in our county is one of the attractive things for all of our citizens here, and having that local authority is one of the things that keeps it attractive. So I concur with Commissioner Travis's remarks and his position. What I'm here to tell you is that of the 14 years that I've been very actively involved, I've also served on the Countywide Visioning and Planning Committee. I've served on the boundary, or actually chaired the Boundary Adjustment Act that former chair Rodney Long asked me to chair for the county, the Municipal Fire Authority, the Alachua County League of Cities, and various other groups. And I can tell you, even with respecting Reverend Greiner and many of the other people that are here that are representing the votes and the people that feel like perhaps they're disenfranchised, I can tell you there are many people in the rural communities that feel very disenfranchised from the process. As Mr. Martin said, 3 of the county commissioners currently were former mayors of the city of Gainesville. When I saw that the county was going to have a charter review commission formed, they sought applications. There were, I believe, 62 people that applied to this body, and I commend each of you for being willing to serve. Out of 62, there were 15 chosen. I felt the influence of that Gainesville elected mentality, if you will, and I don't say that in any derogatory way at all. I just say it as a way that we become involved in politics. I believe influenced the selection of the 15 that are sitting here. I did email and wrote a letter asking if they would make sure that the representation on this body was representative of everybody in the county, including the rural concerns. After each of you were appointed, I took it upon myself to do an analysis to see where each of you perhaps resided or voted or had your place of business. And I'm comfortable to say that I believe the majority of the people here represent somewhat of a Gainesville approach. I would ask that you take into account the comments that were made. Let the voters decide in Alachua County many of these issues. The single-member district, I think, is one that the voters would appreciate the opportunity to be able to. I would urge you, regardless of your feelings on that, to put that out for the voters in terms of a charter amendment. Let them decide if single-member districts is the best way to voice their right to vote here in this county. So I would urge you to consider doing that.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Mayor Calderwood, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you feel that because most of the board is comprised of residents of Gainesville that we're out of touch and we can't relate to you because you're in the rural areas? Is that what I'm understanding?
With all due respect, I believe that where you have your vested interest and where you have the most experience is the direction that takes you. So yes, I do believe that the County Commission currently focuses on those particular issues, and there are many issues: transportation, fire services, law enforcement, where I've served on various committees, that the emphasis is placed on the services in Gainesville, from a very minor thing of traffic signalization that has to do with 441. If it's in Gainesville, it's important. If it's in Micanopy or Alachua, it's not. And there are many issues that I can give you specific examples, because that was a question earlier. What are the specific examples? I can give you many of those that have been voiced. Yes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments, Mayor. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Jerry Wasden. I live in rural northeast Alachua County. My father's family moved across the river from Bradford County in 1921 to Alachua County to farm, and we still have our farm and part of the ag community. And I just want to let you know that I support the single-member districts. Also nonpartisan, and I just want to let you know I want to be short and brief and to the point.
We appreciate that.
Thank you.
And Laura just told us you were in her high school class. That's he hadn't changed at all. See, not at all. He's like me. He hadn't changed at all.
Class of '64.
All right, there you go.
Gainesville High School.
Mayor, good to have another mayor up here tonight.
All righty. Mr. Irby, and to all of you, thank you for your service. I served on the last, I'm Peggy Hanrahan, and I'm, for another month, I'm Gainesville's mayor. I thank you all for your service. I served on the last Charter Review Commission, and so I know the challenge you have before you and the amount of time you're putting in, and so I'm grateful to all of you, as I think we all are, regardless of where you go. I'm really here primarily to speak to the dual vote issue for our municipalities, and I, too, add my voice to Mayor Travis and Mayor Calderwood and others that Gainesville is also supportive of that, and we do hope and anticipate that you will reconsider that. I know that you've had a robust debate, but I hope you will give that some further consideration, because I think you will find all of the cities united in this wish to have the dual vote. So that's my primary message. I can't keep myself from making a little commentary about elections. I have, as you might know, been elected 4 times in Gainesville, and actually twice went to runoff, so I've faced 6 election days. And as you know, actually I hope you know that all of the reforms that you are contemplating for Alachua County are already in place in the city of Gainesville. We have single-member districts, we have term limits, we have nonpartisan elections. Have I covered them all? You know, I could opine on the quality of the city commission versus the county commission. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. I will say a few pros and cons with each of them that I don't think have been touched on, because I do think they're important. There are actually 2 aspects to nonpartisan elections. One of them I really like. One of them I'm not as crazy about. The aspect I really like is the ballot access. Every voter gets to go in and cast their ballot. No one is excluded from any election. And that, I think, is a very good thing, a positive thing. I think, you know, contrary to what you might read in the Gainesville Sun, I think in Gainesville that tends to
open the likelihood of having more conservative elected officials get elected, because in the county, for example, where you have the partisan elections, many of the races are decided in the closed Democratic primary, if not all. But, so take that for what it's worth. The negative aspect, I think, is that you do not show the party of the candidate. And there are actually some restrictions. If people are strict about following the rules, there are some restrictions about talking about your party. There are funny things that people do to get around it, to say, I was the Democrat of the year, but you're not supposed to say, I'm Peggy Hanrahan and I'm a Democrat. But to me, that's a piece of information that the voters are entitled to. And I don't know a single elected official. I'm sure there are some exist, but I personally don't know any who have successfully been elected to office in this area who are not affiliated with some major party. So, and in reality, they do, trust me, in all 4 of my elections, the Republican Party has worked against me, and for the record, once paid fines, although they were helping a Democrat for whatever reason, because there wasn't a Republican in that race, I guess. But it ends up being partisan, whether it appears partisan or not. So keep that in mind. I will make one comment about term limits, and as you know, I was termed once and came back into elective office. Cortland Collier served a total of 18 years. He was termed a total of 3 times. And so, you can continue your public service career if the public is willing to do that. I'll tell you what I think the downside of term limits are, and I think we have seen it in Tallahassee, is that it tends to vest more of the power in the professional staff. And I will tell you, and I will not name names, I once had a member of the city's professional staff say, I will wait you out. And I thought, oh, really? So, even if you aren't going to run again and again, the threat that you might, and they might have to deal with you at some point again in the future, has some balance. Now, some people might prefer that, quite frankly. They might rather have the power be vested in the staff. Most people assume the power is vested in the elected officials, and so I would keep that in mind. And I would also say, I think, there are very few members up there that have served more than 12 years for sure. There's Levita Brown, Penny Wheat.
Only 9 of 32.
I'm running out of names, yeah.
Years.
I do want to just say one thing about turnout. As I said, most of the county commission elections are actually decided in the August or September primary. Most of them are actually decided in the primary. And if you look at the turnout of those races, they tend to be 19, 20, 22, 24%. They're comparable to city races. And in fact, because there was some discussion or debate about this just recently that you might have read about in the newspaper, I went and looked back. I've had 2 elections. One was 28%. That went to a runoff. It was still at about 28%. One was 32%, went to a runoff, and it actually was more. When Rod Smith, who was our local guy, was on the ballot running for governor, it was a 19% turnout in Alachua County. So I would urge you to look at that data before you make any wild assumptions about, what you do and how that impacts. If you wanted the best possible turnout, you would shift it to November, where it's actually decided, because that's where you have the highest turnout. And for the record, I'm okay with that with the city as well, although I agree with what Mr. Reiskin said, Dr. Reiskin said. You do not get the robust debate about the issues. When I first ran for mayor, I went to 23 candidate forums talking only about city issues, and so there's that. The last thing I just wanted to mention on the election front or the service has to do with the salary. And you may know the mayor of Gainesville is paid $38,000 a year because we set the salary ourselves. I think that's too little, but we set it ourselves, and nobody wants to stand up and say, pay me more. I actually have what I think is a reasonably elegant solution to that. Figure out what a decent full-time salary is, and then let them fill in timesheets. And if they work 40 hours a week, they're paid 40 hours a week. And if they work 20 hours a week or 10 hours a week, and I'll tell you why that's significant. And I've served with probably 15 city commissioners and who knows how many county commissioners. Some of them put in practically no time, and some of them put in more than full-time. And for whatever that's worth, that's just my own elegant solution to that problem. I'll conclude because I know I'm going over too long. I do have one other important thing to say about the single-member districts.
the city of Gainesville, when we do our redistricting, has to engage an expert who deals with the GIS and the demographics and the rules and the regulations. The expert we have historically used is Dr. Kenneth Wald at the University of Florida. When I was discussing this with him last week, I saw him at a Holocaust remembrance event, and we were just chit-chatting about this and that. He said he did not think, and I asked him if I could quote him on this, and he said, yeah, go right ahead. He said he did not think that you could respect all the rules of districting and do what's currently in this language to only have 3 go to the borders or whatever. You have to have one person, one vote, and whether you like it or not, Gainesville's about half the population. So what I would urge you to do, if you're walking down that road, talk to someone who really does this and make sure that what you're suggesting is actually legal and defensible. You know, I can tell you for every instance of someone saying that the county commission is too Gainesville oriented, I and any other Gainesville city official can give you an example where we didn't think they were that direction. So, you know, you use your judgment however you're best able. But I do think that before you put forth a single member district recommendation, you should certainly have somebody knowledgeable look at it. And I will say, I think that you should at least have folks vote for a majority of the members of the county commission, which is what happens in the city. But I think you almost have to go to 7 members. And I've served on both a 5 and a 7-member board, and I prefer the 5-member board. I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Thank you
Mr.
very
Chair,
much. Yes, sir. Mr. Springfellow.
with all due respect, my good friends keep walking up to the back of the line, and well, we got to cut it off somewhere.
We really do, Mr. Chair.
What are we going to? How are we going to cut it off?
I got 1 minute. My name is Rod Gonzalez, a resident of Alachua County.
Very briefly.
Yes, sir. I've had the pleasure of meeting with many of the commissioners away from the meeting establishment. I appreciate your time. And regardless of what the debate was, whether it was single-member district or nonpartisan elections, which I would favor both, you all said you believed in letting the voters decide. And it seems very polarizing from everyone who's been coming up. We need to let the voters decide. Plain and simple. For every one person here, there are several hundred who honestly feel disenfranchised. That's why they're not here. But let the voters decide. We appreciate it.
Appreciate your comments. Now, we're trying to save something for the public hearings. That's what we're trying to do here. Yes, sir.
Sam Collins. I've been in Alachua County since 1960, and I will be brief. I'd like to quote on your front page of the website that you attribute to Thomas Jefferson. He says, whenever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government. And I agree. And I'm not here to support any particular proposal. I am here to support that the 5 proposals that Joe Little has proffered be placed on the ballot. That's the essence of my argument. I like what Thomas Jefferson said. I love this experiment we call democracy. It's not always pretty. It's never perfect. But until somebody shows us a better alternative, we'll keep it. We have before us a rare opportunity to demonstrate how much we trust ourselves to be more of a democracy. Let us not waste it. This once-in-a-decade opportunity we have before us cannot be trifled with. You can provide the citizens of Alachua County the prospect of building a political future for themselves, their children, and grandchildren. Now recognize that changes you contemplate must not be taken lightly. Placing these fundamentally profound issues before the voters is in itself a sobering prospect. One could argue that not all counties in Florida have the collective acuity to assume these responsibilities and could not be trusted with such a heavy lift. That said, I think Alachua County does have what it takes to assume ownership of their own future. If not us, who? And who better to decide than those with the biggest stake, the largest investment, the most to gain? Once you've decided it's appropriate for these issues to be placed on the ballot, let the debates begin. The pros, the cons, the plus, the minus, the assets, the liabilities can all be held up to the critics, the believers, the skeptics, the converts to debate, argue, endorse, exaggerate, minimize, and convolute. That's how democracy works. When the votes are counted and we know how Alachua County will map out our future, we will live with the consequences. The issues we contemplate must be given to the voters for resolution. Failure to do that, failure to provide the citizens of Alachua County this seminal opportunity would be no less than insulting. If you vote not to place these 5 proposals on the ballot, you must immediately change the web page to read, "The people cannot be informed and cannot be trusted with their own government." You would essentially say that you know what we need without even asking our opinion. I cannot fathom that level of arrogance. Even if you deem the average voter to have not grown beyond pubescence, at some point all parents allow their kids to venture to the world for their own series of bloody noses, scraped knees, and broken hearts. I think you owe your constituents the opportunity to pave the highway to their own destination, complete with potholes, toll booths, bumps, sharp turns, green vistas, orange and blue sunrises, and golden opportunities. The decision before you is a simple one, black and white, clear cut. Let the voters decide. It's as simple as that. The days that follow will not be so simple, but that's how it should be. Let the pundits, experts, opinion makers, and voters do the heavy lifting. You all have the easy job, allowing us to be grown-ups and live with the consequences of our choices. In the end, it's all about forks in the road and which ones we choose. All I ask of you is to treat us like grown-ups. We'll take it from there.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate that very much, Mr. Collins. Last three speakers.
Thank you very much. My name is Cleve Sharp. Mr. Chair, board members, I am one of the first Charter Review Commission members to get this county a home rule thing. And we've always wrestled in every meeting with single-member districting. I have been for single-member districting for, I guess, 25 years. I agree wholly with Mr. Martin and not with Mr. Jennings. We see things entirely different. Another thing I'd like to say, just because we got a single-member district in the county, not necessarily will an African American be elected. It's going to be all walks of life in the district. So single-member districting is one of my things that I would love to see this county have. And the next issue is term limits. If I don't get one, I'd like to get the other. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Appreciate it very much. Madam School Board Member.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Sharp, and I am speaking as a citizen tonight. The first 3 minutes you don't hear my voice is that I will be counting from 1 to 10. And the reason I am going to do that is because I might be I was understanding that this is a public hearing, but when I see at least 2 members, whether it's an unqualified attack or whether it's a qualified attack, I think that is not the way to go. People they are supposed to be able to express their opinions. It may be different from somebody up there or it may not, but nevertheless, it is an opinion that belongs to someone. I'm not going to take up any more time, but I will say this. In the future for public hearings, would you please just listen to the public? You don't have to agree, but it is not your job to just stand there and dissect what they are saying and put them under duress. But what I would like to say is this, that let the people decide. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you. My name is Eric O'Day. I'm the current chair for the Chamber of Commerce this year. I first want to just thank each and every one of you for the amount of time you've been spending and committing to our community. This is a very important time, and this is a very important process, and I really appreciate everything you're doing. I'm going to be very brief. I just want to say that each and every one of you up here represent the community as a filter on an opportunity we have once a decade, and we really appreciate everything you do, and I want to encourage you to continue to give it the attention and the seriousness that it is. And I want you also to empower our community, our citizens in our county, and trust us that we can be accountable to show up to the polls and vote our conscience. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
We appreciate that very much. Appreciate everyone's coming. That was 28th speaker, so we appreciate everyone coming and hope you'll come back for the actual public hearing starting May the 12th. Appreciate that very much. Thank you. At this time, I said I would recognize Mr. Grundy Gomez if he had something he wanted to move. Sir.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if it might, I'm going to ask Beth Rollins to come to the
Why don't
front.
you make a motion first?
Yes, sir. I wanted to make a motion regarding the municipality ordinance.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
You want to move that we rescind and reconsider that motion? Is that what? what you're saying?
Yes.
That's your motion. Is there a second to that?
A second.
We've got seconds, okay. Thank you very much. At this time, then, I'd recognize you first, and then if you want to yield to Beth, then we'll let you do that.
May I do
Is that what you want to do?
Yes,
Okay.
I want to
Sure.
ask Beth to come forward. Mr. Chair, I wanted to speak about this briefly. Two things. I met with the Alachua League of Cities, and I thought when this was brought before this body last time, we kind of got caught in the mix of, this was a member of our board, a particular member of our board, it got caught up in whether the legalities. This is the Alachua County Charter Review Commission. No member of this district, this is not any, I know some of the members of the city, League of Cities dubbed it one of our members after its name, but it's, all of our members, this is our county's board. This is not any of our, this isn't my board. It isn't Ms. Ferguson's board, Mr. Little's board. It's all of ours. So what I want to say is that we got caught up in missing, I think, the concepts. Our duty is to put, like I said earlier, issues before the public that have to do with governance. That's our particular duty. And to say that it's not legal to, put something on a ballot because it's not constitutional, well, I'm sorry, I don't think there's anything more constitutional when it has to do with how this county is to be governed. And I think where we got caught up in, and like I said to the members of the League of Cities, we got caught up in not hearing the concepts, but they also didn't present the concepts to us, I think, very well. That said, when I got to talk to them, Mr. Chair, I understood the concepts that they were trying to convey to us about how they want to be governed for the next 10 years. And I think that their issue was they don't want the county placing undue strain on them. For example, and I'll give a couple of examples that they were talking about. They weren't ordinance-based. They were mandates. For example, what is good for the city of High Springs may not be good for the city of Micanopy. What's good for the city of Gainesville is not good for Archer. And I think that is an issue of governance, Mr. Chair. That is where, and I think that's where they're asking us, let it go before them, let them vote on it. We should allow the citizens, I know there's members of this commission that talk about issues of home rule. We talk about we're in favor of home rule. They're asking for home rule. And home rule is a governance issue. And I'm going to encourage members of this board to really consider about putting issues of home rule and governance. This isn't a question of constitutionality. There's nothing more constitutional than having home rule and governance. And I think Mr. Martin talked about it better than anybody last time he spoke. He was right then, he's right now. And that's why I'm asking us to reconsider this and put it on the ballot.
Okay, thank you very much. On the question of reconsideration, that's what we're actually talking about right this second. All right, hearing none, then we'll put the...
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
actually, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Which side did Mr. Grundy vote on when we last considered this?
There was 3 that voted in favor. I know Mr. Martin, myself, and one other. I don't think Mr. Grundy was one of those. Is that correct?
No, that's not true. I appreciate it, Commissioner Brinkman. I voted against it because, and I'll say...
You're on the prevailing side.
So that's what I was clarifying. He was on the prevailing side. He can't make the motion. That's all.
Okay. Well, that being the case, I'm going to ask Mary to call the roll then. Mr. Little? Yes, sir.
May I speak
Yes, sir.
for a moment? And I guess I'll speak to the merits of the thing. First of all, we don't have a clue as to what Mr. Grundy's motion is. Does anybody
Okay.
have a clue?
Mr. Motion's, his...
Reconsider. I understand, but reconsider what? We've had some things about cannibalism and other things said to us here tonight. Let me ask you this. Which member of this commission would vote to put in the charter that we will have an Alachua County church? And everybody would say, well, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. And which one would say here, everybody in the county can vote, but white people? And you'd say, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. The Florida Constitution is as clear as a bell. What these people from the League of Cities want, and I can understand why they want them. I'm sympathetic to their point of view. But it's as clear in the bell in the Florida Constitution that the charter of a county is to be adopted by, rescinded by, or amended by the electors of the county. That's in black and white. I read it to you last time in the Florida Constitution. So we can spend our time putting a matter on the ballot that can then be attacked and removed by the courts of Florida, which I predict it will be. And all I'm asking you, do we really want to do that? And I would say let's vote against this motion and put it to bed. If these people have a complaint, it is to go to Tallahassee and ask for an amendment to the Florida Constitution, and certainly the voters of Florida can, in fact, amend the Constitution to produce exactly what they want. But this body, in my opinion, and our lawyer has agreed with me, I think, I don't want to misquote her, but I believe, and she's nodding affirmatively, we don't have the power to do it. So why waste time doing it?
Mr. Chair, would you put that up on the screen? She's got it so that we'll know what's being asked to be reconsidered.
I actually
here.
want to talk about the motion. He asked about the merits of what my motion was.
Okay.
So I want to clarify that, Mr. Chair.
You're recognized.
Actually, Mr. Martin, did you?
Well, yeah, I think Commissioner Little points out something that concerns me. We've heard a lot about, well, let the people decide. Let's put it out there. Trust us. And not that I'm always going to agree with Commissioner Little, but I think that point has merit. So, in the idea of trusting us and hearing what everyone had to say, we've been putting a lot of information out there saying what Mr. Little has put out is not constitutional. In the purpose of issue of fairness, I was wondering if there is their opinion from the League of Cities, which can educate me or give me some basis to believe that it would be constitutional, because that's all that's out there, and I think that's a good point, Commissioner Little, unless you have something to counter that.
Actually, there was
Beth Rollins from the League of Cities, and she
There was
provided us a letter.
Yes, there was a 4-page contrary opinion in your agenda packet for last meeting.
That's right.
You have it.
All right. Thank you very much. Further on the question, and that is to rescind and reconsider this question. The question is placed up there: shall Alachua County Charter be amended to require charter amendments that transfer or limit municipal service, function, power, and authority to take effect within or with regard to municipality, only if the amendment is approved by a majority of Alachua County voters and approved by the majority of municipality voters? That would make it where it would have effect inside the city rather than just the unincorporated area. Last comment. Mr. Glazer.
Just a point of clarification. I know we're just talking about readdressing it. We're really not passing this.
That's all we're doing.
Okay.
We're just seeing if we want to take this matter up, and it'll become number 11 on the sheet. Or 12 on the sheet.
Well, I guess my point is it going to remain the same, or is there something different that's being offered?
I think it's the same question. We just have additional information is what they're saying.
All right.
Actually, Mr. Chair, I believe that they actually, and this is where Ms. Rollins, if you would please come up and address, there was some changes that were made, I believe, to Ms. Rollins. I would like you to, actually, this is something you should speak on. There were some changes made between the last motion that was brought up before their last presentation and this one. I believe that you all made changes from the last presentation to this one. Am I correct?
No, we are asking you to reconsider the motion that the proposal that you voted on at the last meeting.
Okay.
All right. I think everybody understands then we're just at this point saying, shall we reconsider this motion?
If I may, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
sir.
I'd just like to point out that as I read what's up on the board now, that means we could have a situation where a charter amendment failed because one city voted against it. And that is unconstitutional because it takes away my right as a resident not of that city to have my vote count. And if it doesn't, then that means that the charter or the specific provision of the charter would not apply in that city, and the charter by definition applies throughout the county. This is why the Florida Constitution says the electors of the county. I remain firmly opposed to this.
Actually, what it does actually state is two things, and I'll make it a big state, little state thing. First off, I always hear for Commissioner Little talking about this is not a constitutional issue. This is a home rule issue. This is not. They're simply asking to have the right to be governed and govern themselves. That's not unconstitutional. They do have a right to govern themselves. They do have a right, Commissioner Little, I'm sorry, I respectfully disagree with you. While I give you deference, I think you're absolutely incorrect. And very few in this state can actually compete and even tell you that you're wrong when it comes to constitutionality issues, but I think this is an issue of governance. And I think that they're asking to have protections within the municipality to not have issues that mandate unruly mandates upon them. They want to have home rule. And I don't understand how that's unconstitutional. And furthermore, Mr. Chair, the Constitution is how many things that can we say are interpreted greater than our Constitution? Not just our United States Constitution, but the state Constitution. You know, I can say for a fact, Pinellas County, the Charter Review Commission there is not one Charter Review Commission in this state that has been handcuffed more than this Charter Review Commission out of any Charter Review Commission in the state. They don't have the same constraints at the Pinellas County Charter Review Commission that this one does. So are they any different than we are? I mean, it's absurd. We have been handcuffed from some of the legal opinions that have been given by our attorney. And not to disrespect our attorney. Our attorney is very well respected throughout this state. But I do feel that this Charter Review Commission has been handcuffed. And I think that we need to address this matter. And I think it is an issue of home rule. There's nothing unconstitutional about this, Mr. Commissioner Little.
All right. Let's get to the actual question, and then we'll decide if we're going to debate this some more here in a few minutes. So the question is, shall we rescind the previous vote, which was to dismiss this question, or that it wouldn't be considered anymore, or shall we rescind that vote and reconsider it at the appropriate time? So, Mayor, if you'll just call the roll. If you want to vote to reconsider it, vote yes. If you don't want to reconsider it, vote no. Yes, sir, John. Point of order.
I think I know the answer, but I just want to be clear. I know that when you reconsider, the motion has to be made, and I guess does it have to be seconded by
it was seconded.
The opposite? It was. When you actually vote on whether to reconsider, it doesn't matter how you voted on the previous time.
Doesn't matter.
You
can vote any way you want to.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question on
Yes, ma'am.
procedure, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
ma'am.
Do you vote last?
No, just put me in the list.
Okay.
That's fine.
It's going to be alphabetical. then.
Sometimes we'll vote up, sometimes we'll vote down. We'll make it fun.
Okay, Mr. Ackerman?
No.
Mr. Brinkman? No. Ms. Ferguson? Mr. Glazer?
Yes.
Mr. Grundy Gomez?
Yes.
Mr. Irby?
Yes.
Mr. Little?
No.
Mr. Obrancy Martin?
Yes.
Mr. John Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Stringfellow?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Williams Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Okay, the vote was 11-4 in favor of reconsideration. Thank you very much, Mary. So we'll bring that up, and maybe we should bring it up first since we've been debating it already.
That's a good idea.
Since we're already hot on that topic. We'll place that motion back on the table at this time then and decide whether or not it gets 8 votes and can go to the public hearings at this time. So the motion before us is what you see there. We'll make it basically, in the legislature, call it committee bill, that this is what we're going to decide if it's going to go to the public hearing. So that's our consideration at this time. So, Mr. Grundy, I'll recognize you first.
Mr. Chair, I think everything, I'm not going to hold up discussion anymore. I think everything's been said that needs to be said, and motion to question.
Let me recognize others that may want to speak. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I promise I was very long-winded the last time we talked about this, so I promise to be extremely short. I think I've made no bones about how I feel about this particular issue. I think that when Mayor Hanrahan was up here earlier, giving her endorsement to it, since we, because sometimes it comes out that people think I'm anti-Gainesville, and I'm absolutely not. I live and breathe and love Gainesville. When I was in Hawthorne City Commission, I was just very pro-Hawthorne. So that's the difference. And I've always been one to speak out for the small municipalities, but I think her voice spoke to it as clear as it could that, she is one that I know a lot of people have respected. Not that they don't respect everybody, but I would encourage you to look if Mayor Hanrahan is coming before you telling you that she sees this as an issue, I think that gives weight. The only thing I would say about it, and with all due respect to both of our official counselor and our esteemed unofficial counselor, Mr. Little, is that, whenever I've sat on commissions, whether it be committees like this or city commissions, I always want to hear very clearly and concisely what the legal opinions are. And then ultimately, I need to not be afraid to do whatever I think is right, regardless of that opinion. Because if you think about it, and this is, I'd tell you in a minute, if I needed a lawyer, I'd hire either one of these two in a second. But if all we needed to do to me, some of the greatest accomplishments that have ever been done in this country have come from challenges. Think about how this country would be if people didn't vote for things that were ultimately challenged in court. So I'm not afraid of that ultimate challenge of any of these issues in court, because it is the very essence of what becomes our law is precedence of court challenge. Much of what we hold dear in this country has been challenged over the years and set up as precedent by law in court. So if this, maybe it will be challenged, but so what if it is? Then maybe you'll get some initiative. So with all due respect, I appreciate the council. I, for one, think this is the right thing to do. And if I'm proven wrong, then so be it. But you have to be able to vote what you think is right, not just what you think is your legal opinion. That's just my experience, and I bring that experience from serving on commissions and being advised by some tremendous lawyers like we are tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm at least a little baffled by the idea that our Constitution is something that needs to be disregarded. We've got a legal opinion from our distinguished attorney which cites the prevailing law as it is now in the state. And we have an opinion from the Florida League of Cities which is a wish list of how this could change if life was better. It is not a legal opinion. It agrees that the prevailing law in the state at this time is that this is not a constitutional provision. I understand that this might be a good idea. I'm not particularly unsympathetic to the concept, but I'm pretty unsympathetic to the idea of putting something on the ballot that gets voted for by the citizens of this state, of this county, and then is ruled at great expense unconstitutional. And I think that's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. The Florida League of Cities certainly has the ability to lobby the state legislature to change this issue, and I'm just not sure that the citizens of Alachua County should foot the bill for this little adventure in constitutional law.
Thank you. Mr. Brinkman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Ackerman's comments about fiscal cost really strike me, because I believe that probably everybody who's gotten up and spoken in favor of this dual vote concept would argue very strenuously that these are hard economic times for local governments and they need to be fiscally prudent. And this is totally imprudent. It will end up costing this county a lot of money. The fact of the matter is, if this were to pass, we might as well repeal the charter and no longer be a charter county, because any single municipality could block any future charter amendment. That says only, it says, excuse me, I have the floor. It says only if the amendment is approved by a majority of Alachua County voters and also approved by a majority of voters in that municipality. That means any single municipality, the voters in it, and there are municipalities with, a little over 1,000 people in them, probably less than 1,000 registered voters. That means they would be able to block the rest of us. That violates the one person, one vote principle. The county is a political subdivision of the state. It is a unit. The charter must govern throughout the county. That's just that bedrock simple.
Thank you very much. It may need some wordsmithing, but I'm sensing that's not what they're saying, is only within that one city. Am I correct on that? Only within that one city.
And Mr. Chair, if I may continue then, the problem with that is the charter must apply throughout the county. That is the nature of the charter. If we're only going to have a charter that does not apply in certain little municipalities, they might as well not be a member of this county. But I don't think they can succeed. They have to go to the state legislature here again. And there's another way for all the people who say, let the voters decide. Well, you have the opportunity to do that. All you have to do is form a political action committee, file an amendment with the supervisor of elections, collect 10% of the electorate of the entire county within 180 days, and I wish you luck.
Appreciate those comments. I think Mr. Martin here. Yeah.
I voted yes to reconsider. And I asked Ms. Rollins, is that correct? Oh, Ms. Rollins. I am concerned with a perception, at least my perception, that on a lot of these issues we're not being deliberative enough. Concerning the energy in the room or how popular a particular item is, I have to say, in my opinion, that there's been a rush to judgment to some extent on a lot of these issues. And I think we made a decision fairly quickly to vote against the amendment. However, I was hoping that I would get a little more information about the legalities of it, because I'm, for one, do think that we serve more of a role than bean counting here. Just counting in other people who think it's a popular idea, that we do need to vet these issues, that we do need to filter these issues. And right now, although I want to give you an opportunity to be heard, which is why I voted yes, I'm still not hearing how this is legal, which is not something that I personally can ignore if it's not.
I recognize Ms. Rollins.
Understood. I cannot stand here and tell you that this is constitutional any more than someone can stand here and tell you that it is unconstitutional. There are conflicting legal opinions about this. This is a subject upon which reasonable minds can differ, and it has never been litigated by a court. There is not a court precedent. That is the only thing that the two legal opinions agree on, is that there is no precedent for this. This has been in effect in Pinellas County for well over a decade. The only time that it has been litigated, it was not judged by, there was no ruling by a judge, but in the settlement agreement, the county did stipulate to the constitutionality of the provision. It is the same provision that you see here. You also have it in your packets. It was also adopted in Palm Beach County in 2008. And will undergo its first election this November in 2010. Other parts of the state have this. The courts have never spoken directly to it. And so for anyone to say, I can't stand here and tell you absolutely positively a court would rule, because a court never has. And so therefore I don't think anyone can say absolutely positively a court would rule on the other side either. I think that this is not a courtroom. Maybe someday one will be necessary, but for the moment, this is a policy board, and we're asking you to do the right thing and to adopt the same home rule, dual vote regulatory provisions that exist in other parts of the state and in other county charters.
Mr. Chair, if I could, you would agree that as this policy board, considerations like provoking unwarranted litigation should be a concern of ours, correct?
I absolutely agree with that, and as a Pinellas County resident who has lived under this provision for 12 years, I can tell you that it is our opinion in our county that this has removed the possibility of litigation. That when you decide how regulatory changes will be made between the counties and the cities, you leave that to the voters. And that's then no longer needs the interference of the courts. And so when we put forward in Pinellas County a question of regulatory authority, if that is not appropriate for the municipality, that municipality opts out. This is not a veto. It's not anywhere close to a veto. What it says is shall take effect within the municipality only if the amendment is approved by a majority of the countywide voters and the city voters. So this is an opt-out provision applicable only to things that are already regulated by municipal regulatory authority in the event that somewhere down the line a charter amendment comes and seeks to alter that authority. We want the right to have the say. That's it. It's that simple.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Let me go to Mr. Runyon and come back. Anybody on that?
Does anybody else? Was somebody else? I was at. Does anybody else want to discuss it? Because I was going to call a question.
I do.
Okay.
There is currently a charter amendment in the charter passed in 2000 by 70.5% of the electorate, which holds that the county has the legal authority to regulate air and water pollution throughout the county. What is, I'd like to ask both the current speaker and our attorney what their opinion is of the effect of putting that charter amendment in our charter would have on that one that's already there.
My opinion is that it would have no effect on that at all. When this provision was adopted in Palm Beach, they had 4 provisions that were already grandfathered into their charter. They had well field protections and traffic concurrency, and frankly, the other 2 are escaping me at the moment. But the provisions that are already in the charter are not affected by this charter because it only affects votes that take place after its adoption. So anything that is currently there is grandfathered in and safely ensconced in your charter.
Where do you see the language that says it only applies to future ones? Because it doesn't say that.
It's implied, I think.
Well, I'm sorry, but implied does not work when you're talking about charters and constitutions.
If we,
The question is, what is municipal service function? Is that issue that you're talking about come under that?
Well, it's power or authority, too. It also says power or authority, such as the authority to regulate air and water pollution.
I think we had this discussion last time.
We did.
And I think it was
Now,
answered
if I may, I'd also like the opinion of the attorney, our attorney, the commission's attorney.
okay.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I think, with all due respect to Commissioner Brinkman's question, this was brought up last time, and the attorney gave her answer last time regarding the same matter. So we already had an answer to that, Mr. Brinkman.
He's asked for it, so Sarah, if you would
I don't understand.
talk a bit.
You've let your guy have another bite at the apple.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This is Sarah Blakely, our attorney here.
It's my view that this language, not having been drafted up as a charter amendment, but instead just put up on a screen here as the question that would go before the voters, would apply to future charter amendments only and wouldn't affect the current charter. And of course, the current charter says that municipal ordinance shall prevail over county ordinances to the extent of any conflict right now.
Right, and that is the only exception in our charter currently.
Correct.
But you agree that it is implied that it only takes effect in the future because it does not say it, anything's grandfathered in. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Well,
It only affects the future
if
charter
we
amendments.
decide to move this on to public hearing, then I just want to alert the members that Sarah would then, Ms. Blakely, would then take this and wordsmith it and make it as legal as, try to work with what we've directed her to do. This may or may not be the final language when she finishes with it. This is their language, not her language. So I would just advise the board that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have one. While Ms. Blakely's here, could you reiterate your opinion that you've already given us regarding the constitutionality of this issue? I hate to put you on the spot.
Do I have to go through all 20 pages?
No,
of
you
my
don't.
opinion?
But if you could
Thank
just
you.
recap it.
Thank you.
Well, maybe you could just, do an executive summary of yours versus the argument that's presented by the League of Cities from Fraser, Hubbard, Brandt, Trask, and Iacovone.
Well, I would agree with your analysis of the contrary opinion, and that is the bottom line is current case law would tend to suggest that this amendment is not lawful. That contrary opinion suggested that the current case law is incorrect and suggests that we ought to just let the people decide, because unless they decide, we'll never get a ruling one way or another. That's my reading of that 4-page letter, and it sounds like you agree with that. The bottom line, and again, I can go through all 20 pages, but the Article 8, Section 1C relating to charters is very clear. A county government may be established by charter, which shall be adopted, amended, or repealed only upon vote of the electors of the county. So that means that it's a countywide election, that the voters can decide what the charter is going to look like, and specifically can decide what the charter is going to say with regard to whether a county ordinance or a city ordinance prevails in the case of conflict. On that point, the same constitutional article, but this one, Section G, says the charter shall provide which shall prevail in the event of conflict between county and municipal ordinances. So it's the obligation of the charter to provide which shall prevail, a county ordinance or a city ordinance, and they're supposed to be charter amendments that are adopted on a countywide basis. In a nutshell, that's it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blakely.
Mr. Martin, Attorney, one question. You said that charter amendments are supposed to be adopted by a countywide basis, correct?
Yes, sir.
If this were put on the ballot and passed by the majority of the electorate, would it not, in fact, be passed by the entire majority of the county of Alachua County?
It absolutely would, but future charter amendments would not. Future charter amendments would be dependent on, the countywide effect would be dependent on whether each city voters approved them.
I guess what I'm saying is if the county residents decided that they wanted that, then in and of itself, isn't that a countywide charter amendment? Isn't that it? I understand where you might argue that if this passed, that future might be challengeable and it might not be amendable to the Constitution, but this particular ordinance, in and of itself, not what it may do later, but right this minute, if it were passed by the majority of the residents of Alachua County, would comply just as far as compliance, not the language of it, but the compliance that that a charter. You said that the Constitution basically says that a charter amendment has to be passed by the countywide government. Is that not? Countywide voters. Is not correct?
Let me answer your question this way.
I mean, can I?
No, I'm not a yes or no lawyer very often, and I don't think I can be that right now. If this were to pass, and let's also assume that the air and, environmental ordinances, air and water pollution ordinance were not in your charter. So let's assume, first off, that this language passes, and then 2 years from now, the Board of County Commissioners wants to propose a charter amendment that says we want to have countywide standards on air and water pollution, and actually puts that on the ballot because they have the opportunity and the legal authority to propose charter amendments themselves. They put that on the ballot, and it fails in the city of Micanopy.
I understand
What
you're
happens
saying,
then?
But I think that Mr. Brinkman made the case when he said that over 70% of the people passed it, so it's not logical to assume that it would fail in any city if they passed it. You can
What if all 30% lived in the city of Micanopy? And additionally, how are we going to notify voters in the future that it's going to have this effect? Are we going to say, and does a future charter commission or the Board of County Commissioner have the authority to say, notwithstanding this language, we want to regulate air and water pollution control on a countywide basis? That's the big lawsuit, whether you can actually notwithstand this language in the future. If there's a need and a desire.
If you can give that opinion, with all due respect, Counselor, you say you don't answer yes or no questions, but we hired you, and I am one of the people who hired you. You are my attorney and this board's attorney, collectively and individually. With all due respect, if I ask you a yes or no question, you should give me an answer to that question. And then if you, wait a minute, and then if you want to expand.
Mr. Chair, I object.
I have served on boards before.
Got the floor.
Mr. Chair, I object.
Let me take things back here and get us back under control. Appreciate that very much. I think we have to respect Ms. Blakely's professional answer, And she has a right to answer professionally. I mean, she has a responsibility to tell us what she needs to tell us.
And if I ask a yes or no
There may not be a yes or no
Mr. Chair,
answer. Is
Mr.
what we're
Chair,
saying. Let's keep control here.
Point of order.
Mr. Brinkman.
I'd like an answer to a question that's just come up.
Actually, I had the next question.
Is Ms. Bleakley an attorney for the board as a whole, or
Yes.
does she represent us individually also? Because it's not my opinion that she does.
She's
I
our
think
board.
she represents the board as a whole,
That's
correct?
Mr. Gomez.
Mo-
Grundy Gomez.
Mr. Grundy.
Yes, sir. You got it.
Grundy, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Motion to question, Mr. Chair.
All right. Let me just, I'm not hearing we didn't recognize that as nor a second. Any further comments on this before I want to recognize the manager here. He's been standing and he wants to speak on this question.
Thank you very much.